The granular product that would get into the soil the quickest is probably protected urea. It'll break down very quickly and get into the soil, and it'll do its job there if there's growth to be capitalised on. Because K is the engine oil of the plant. It moves all the moisture and nutrients around the plant, and it's going to be really, really important.
This week I'm joined by John O'Loughlin, Head of Sustainability at Grassland Agro, to have a discussion around fertiliser prices, outlook and product choice in current conditions. To start, I asked John to explain what exactly CBAM is and how it is impacting the prices farmers are paying for fertiliser.
So CBAM is the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, and effectively what that means is it's a tax per se on the carbon that's used in the manufacture of carbon intense products such as fertiliser and steel. So they'd be the two that probably affect your listeners the most. But the long and the short of CBAM is that previously we hadn't been accounting for the carbon required to produce fertiliser, whereas EU producers of fertiliser have very strict emission reduction targets. It wasn't the same maybe for third countries. So a third country is anything outside of the EU zone. And effectively what's happening now, as of the 1st of January 2026, products that enter the EU zone, when they meet a border, the emissions that were used in producing that, or the carbon that was used in producing that fertiliser, now has to be paid for. We're in the first year of this, Stuart, and it basically equated to €50 a tonne on urea for 2026. It's not going to increase significantly for 2027, but as we get out to 2034, you could be looking at really significant charges. The models are kind of saying in the tune of as high as €300, which is, really worrying from an Irish ag point of view.
And what's happening at the minute at a European level, John, in terms of there was a response to the fact that fertiliser prices had spiked because of the war, maybe a lack of availability of urea, etc., obviously due to issues in the Straits of Hormuz and so forth, but and oil prices obviously as well. So we'll say, has the CBAM been charged to Grassland, we'll say, and have you been, obviously you have to pass that charge on then to the end user, has that been happening since the start of January? So
that has been happening since the start of January, Stuart, yeah. But there was a lot of confusion, you're 100% right. So it came into effect actually 3 or 4 years ago, CBAM, but it wasn't until the 1st of January 2026 where we were liable to pay that money. We were in a reporting phase before that. But on the 1st of January 2026, the rubber hit the road and we had to pay the money. And then on the 7th of January 2026, the EU Commission announced an intention to introduce a legislation that would cause the temporary suspension and possibly the retrospective suspension of CBAM during periods of elevated fertiliser prices. And then lo and behold, the last couple of days of February, the Iran war broke out and fertiliser prices escalated massively. So that's pretty much what the Article 27A, this proposed draft legislation, was brought into place for, but that still hasn't been passed by the EU Commission to the best of my knowledge. And there would also be, we gather, a reluctance from the EU to implement that Article 27A, and the rationale behind the reluctance to introduce or enact that would be because I suppose we're kind of conceding defeat in the fact that we can't look after ourselves in terms of energy and fertiliser in Europe, which is kind of why CBAM was brought into place in the first place. So there's a lot of moving parts. There's obviously a lot of political pressure there as well. And to be fair, the farm organisations are really flying the flag for Irish farmers in relation to CBAM and trying to get the best possible outcome. But to be honest with you, it looks unlikely that there will be a suspension at this stage. And what it holds going forward, I'm not sure, but you'd imagine if we got to a stage where it exceeded, even 100 or 150 euro a tonne, there would have to be a real bit of soul searching done by the EU Commission and on the effect that it's having on our farmers. So a lot of moving parts, Stuart.
Yeah, and I suppose, John, last question on it before we go talk about the current situation then is, like, if it goes to that €300 a tonne, does it actually become viable for some European country to start manufacturing urea products, or we'll say, or can it be manufactured, or does it have to be imported all the time, like?
Yeah, so that's a good point. I should have said that from the outset. You're right. So 85-90% of the urea that we consume in Europe is produced outside of Europe. So we import 90%, which is a huge quantity. The reason for that is probably because of cheaper energy elsewhere, and it's a very energy dense process. So the economics of starting a plant or scaling up production in Europe, I'm not sure of, but given the cost of doing business in Europe at the moment, I would say it would be unlikely.
So, as I said there, just before we started into the meat of that there, fertiliser prices obviously, and you said it yourself, spiked with the war in Iran. They seem to have eased back a nice bit lately. So just a very, like, crystal ball gazing from your scenario, and it really is dependent on what Donald Trump decides to do. Like in a lot of cases, like the price of oil is fluctuating up and down and so forth. And that'll impact on the fertiliser situation as well. But what way are you kind of seeing things going in the short term? It's probably unfair to ask you to comment on anything longer than that, really. Like,
yeah, it's not really. It's probably steady as she goes at the moment, because there's an awful lot of fertiliser in the country, Stuart, to be perfectly honest with you. So, everyone was kind of hedging their bets that things would drop off. But in reality, I'd say what's there is there. Now, looking more medium term, it's very tricky to say. You'd imagine that there could be some sort of resolution in Iran, and things would start to get flowing again, and then maybe next season we'd be in a better position and prices would simmer down. People kind of looking at world prices and energy markets, you see these headline figures that the price is very low of certain nutrients, but in reality there's no business going on, because everyone is at a global level. There's very little fertilizer trading, so that's kind of causing, no one truly knows the price of fertilizer until the demand comes back into it in maybe September or October. But listen, the fundamentals of fertilizer were all wrong before the price increase as well, due to Iran, whereby gas at the time was kind of in the middle, but grain was very low, and they're the two fundamentals of fertilizer pricing. So it's very tricky to say, but I'd say for any listener at the moment, whatever prices you can get from your local merchant or co-op, it will probably be fairly similar until the end of the season, the 14th of September, I'd say, Stuart.
Okay, very good, John. So I suppose then, John, coming on to, like, depending on what part of the country you're in, I was talking to Gavin Doherty. Gavin's one of the advisors up in Donegal in the last couple of days, and like they've come off they're just coming off the feeding of the silage at the moment because of the wet conditions that they've been experiencing up there, and low dry matters and so forth. And then we have 22% dry matter here in Moore Park at the minute, as at the start of the week, and lots of guys in groups around here beginning to indicate that they're beginning to see signs of drought. Very dry ground, we'll say ground that's grey, is slow to come back, beginning to show signs of burning in parts, like, as well. Now, growth has been quite good. We'll say the growths for the last week are actually still quite good, but the predictions from the Grass 10 newsletter are that there will be a significant drop off in growth. What are we'll say, you obviously have a team of advisors out on the ground, as well as ourselves advising people around fertiliser usage and so forth. What are you suggesting to people at the moment between, I suppose, the droughty conditions and, like, just, I suppose, to really emphasise how it's impacting? Like, we have the Ballyvedden Open Days coming up on the 22nd of July up in the farm in Tipperary, and Chloe Miller, the farm manager there, was telling me that one of the people involved in the work up there was telling me that they're started feeding silage to some of the stock up there today. And then we'll say you're obviously involved with the Grassland Association, and you have the summer tour on the day before, on Tuesday the 21st in Waterford, just outside of Clonmel, but it's in County Waterford, on the O'Gorman's farm. And you were saying that they're actually not too bad. So there's a real mixed bag around there, like, and I suppose you have to be fierce careful with the advice that's given from the point of view of making sure that people do the right thing for their own area, as opposed to maybe listening to what's happening and it might not be affecting them at all.
100%. I couldn't agree more. I was up in up home in Clare there today, and like the place looks fantastic. Never looked better. Like whereas I travelled a good bit of the country there this week, and in around Kilkenny, Carlow, Kildare, Wexford, Wicklow, gone very dry. I was going to be funny and say that the 22-year drought is continuing in Cork as well, Stuart, but the fact you're doing me a favour, I said I wouldn't upset you. But the lads in the Irish Grassland Association Dairy Summer Tour down in just outside Clonmel, the O'Gormans, they're starting to get dry. They would be well used to getting dry as well, light ground, low rainfall, and it's very much farm specific, region specific, Stuart. I think that is the key message here, that there is, just because someone is feeding silage, you see them on social media in the dry stand in the country in Carlow or wherever. It could be, you base it off your own farm and your own growth rate. But the one thing I would say, Stuart, and maybe farmers aren't doing it consistently, even though they know they should, is that we have to measure grass. Now, there's a way of farming into a drought and there's a way of farming out of a drought. And we have to establish what grass is on the farm at the moment. And then if today is Monday, you need to be doing a walk 5 days later on Friday to see how things are shaping up. There's a lot of talk always at this time of the year when things start to slow down around, what fertiliser will we spread. In general, if your soil moisture deficit is over 50 mil, you'd probably be you'd be saying to hold tough maybe if it's going to increase. So if it's 50 mil and increasing, I would probably be saying, listen, there's no need to go hatchet with nitrogen if you've been up to date with fertiliser applications in the last maybe 10 days or 2 weeks.
Okay, and then we'll say, I suppose, in terms of I think the key thing, that question has come up a lot this week or last week, really, for me, in terms of people that I'm talking to, asking, should we be spreading? And yet we have very strong growth rates with the last week or 10 days, again, kind of contrary to what nearly people would have expected. So like the Grass 10 newsletter is predicting 40s to 50s. So does that justify still continuing with some fertiliser? And I suppose, what's the product of choice then?
It does, Stuart, absolutely. It does. And again, it's farm specific. So if that's what we really need to be aware of in relation to decisions. Generally, when we get into real droughty conditions, my advice is, the only fertiliser we should be spreading is lime, really. But the fact that this is so localised, it will have to be different for every farm. And I would be recommending to go with fertiliser. I would be maybe going 2/3 rate, and the granular product that would get into the soil the quickest is probably protected urea. So one of the challenges with urea mid-season is that it absorbs moisture very quickly, and in our humid kind of conditions that we have in Ireland, it will break down very quickly. So from a spreading and bagging point of view for farmers, and then the bagging for ourselves, that's the challenge. But it's actually an advantage in this sort of weather, that it'll break down very quickly and get into the soil, and it'll do its job there if there's growth to be capitalised on. Okay,
and then I suppose, John, as the head of sustainability, I know the soil fertility piece is very high on your agenda. In fairness, in your team, you push that hard. How important is it, from, we'll say, the work that you've seen, and maybe tracking some of the farms that you're working with regularly there, in how they respond, or how their farms respond to these drought situations, going into them and coming out of them, as they've improved their soil fertility by working on it, maybe?
Yeah, it has a huge impact, Stuart. You slow down an awful lot quicker, and you get going an awful lot quicker coming in and out of a drought. K is probably a key nutrient at the moment. So if we were talking about nitrogen, and that's where all the debate is in relation to fertiliser applications, you should be pairing that with potassium, if at all possible, because K is the engine oil of the plant. It moves all the moisture and nutrients around the plant, and it's going to be really, really important. And farms our paddocks of farms with low K are probably starting to get stressed and slow down an awful lot quicker than paddocks that maybe are optimal for K. Then the lime one it's a huge opportunity, in relation to that farm cover will start to decline, unfortunately. The ground conditions will be fantastic everywhere in the country, even the farms that are maybe starting to just dry up along the west of Ireland. So a huge opportunity to be no spoiling of sticking it or grass getting stuck to the leaf and kind of souring grass as well. So and really, Stuart, they're non-negotiables now at this stage, because we've very short memories. I think I heard a lot of farmers saying, listen, I'm not going to go mad spreading fertiliser for my second cut or third cut now, depending on what part of the country you're in. But we're probably going to head into a period of feeding silage, unfortunately, on a lot of farms. And realistically, that's going to bring up the debate around, droughts and are we feeding enough, etc. But are we growing enough grass to sustain our stocking rate? The whole farm stocking rate, the milking platform stocking rate debate will come up. But for me, a non-negotiable is to have your lime and your K right, because you're not realising the true potential of your farm. There are easy wins. The lime piece is inexpensive. But it really is a case now that there's no excuse good enough, and we just have to do it. And then the K as well, there's no limits on it. There is a few challenges, but if you speak to any Teagasc advisor, any Grassland Agro advisor, they'll be able to give you good advice to stop, any of those potential issues around luxury uptake, whether it be grass tetany or milk fever and silage. So, they're really the key messages for me at the moment.
Yeah, and I suppose, John, you mentioned the milk fever and the tetany there. They tend to be used as excuses almost not to do the right thing in terms of soil fertility. But there's, obviously yourselves again with the products that you have as well, the mineral side of the business. You can overcome them by making sure that the stock get access to the appropriate mineral. So people really need to just, as you said, get on with it and get the soil fertility up. And I've been on a couple of farms in the last couple of weeks as well, where their figures are absolutely fantastic. Now, K, obviously, it just moves a lot, and it moves quickly, especially on silage ground. But P status up in the 90%, lime status at 100%, that's putting you in a great position to just react with your K fertilizer, we'll say, every couple of years. And I know John Maher and yourself are good buddies, and John is always talking about making sure that there's Murate or SOP or one of those products at least around the yard, and that people are addressing that K piece the whole time. So we'll say people, just for example, so say people have straight protected urea in the yard currently, they don't have K. Should they be running away and getting a pallet of Murate or a pallet of sulfate SOP, and maybe using that over the next number of weeks now in the dry conditions to try and boost the response coming out of the dry conditions, we'll say then?
Yeah, I was listening to John and Aidan Brennan on their own, or on Aidan's podcast as well, Stuart, and John, and they were saying it's like the poor man's irrigation from New Zealand. And I think it was a really good way of just capturing the role of K in the plant and in moving the moisture and the nutrients around, as we said. So I would agree. I would say if you got a pallet of MOP, you're in a great position there. Go out, bag, or even 3/4 of a bag, and get some of those things rectified. And even on silage ground, as you said, there's such a pull there. So if your second cut will surely be done in this fine spell. And now you might be feeding your first cut at the same time, but there's a huge opportunity to get on top of it. Where I think we fall down on K is we put a good program in place. We've lots of slurry around in spring for our first cut silage, and then our second cut silage might only get 30 or 40 units of K, but we really need to be going with 1 unit of nitrogen for 1 unit of K when we're closing up for silage. It's a good rule of thumb. You won't run yourself into luxury uptake then either, Stuart. So if you're going with 80 units of nitrogen for your first cut and 60 for your second, you're going with that 80 when you're applying, and that's excluding the slurry that's spread in springtime. And then when if you're going with 60 units of N for your second cut, you're getting out 60 units of K as well. So that's kind of a good rule of thumb for people, that they won't run themselves into bother with luxury uptake.
And I might put you on the spot now with this one, John, but actually he asked me recently and I didn't have the answer for him. Is there a difference between the MOP and the SOP in terms of would you have a preference for either?
Well, it depends who's paying for it. If you're paying for it, I'd go for the SOP. If I was paying for it myself, I'd go for the MOP, to be honest with you, Stuart, because there's quite a difference in price. So the SOP, yes, it would be... it would probably be arguably you're getting your sulfur there as well, obviously, which is a good bonus. But the form of potassium is probably a little bit better from a soil health point of view because there's less chloride. So it's potassium chloride in MOP. So a lot of the horticulture growers would be actually using SOP, people growing spuds and stuff like that. They generally get higher dry matters, but from from this, the audience listening to this, right? There's the national average statistics for soil fertility were 48% in dairy farms, which is a profitable enterprise, suboptimal for K. And there's 1.5 tons to be got back on every hectare that's suboptimal. That's what it's costing us. It's costing us 1.5 tons of growth. So I think kind of maybe any form of K, Stuart, would be better than none, like, rather than splitting hairs over the MOP or the SOP.
Yeah, okay. So look, I'm conscious that you're cut tight on time there today. So I suppose I'll have to get my dig in at you as well, in that you were probably hoping for fine weather for the 19th of July there, but you don't really care anymore.
Oh, let it rain.
But you're
the ticket race is on though, Stuart. The ticket race is on. The scramble for tickets is on for another event, all right.
Yeah. And what event would that be, John?
Oh, well, I'm shocked that you asked, but yeah, we have the IGA Dairy Summer Tour coming up on the O'Gorman's Farm, Stuart, and promises to be a brilliant day. We're building on the back of brilliant event that you were involved in yourself last year with the Toomeys and the Birminghams. This year we're going to Waterford, and yeah, really interesting story. Two brothers that were farming together passed the farm down to two first cousins. It was split in half, and the two first cousins are Michael and Ollie. They're getting on famous still, and they've grown their business on grass. Michael has grown from 90 cows to 200, and then Ollie has grown from 90 cows to nearly 1,000 there, with his brothers involved as well, milking across 5 different platforms. And like either of the two lads, you'd be wondering yourself, how in the name of God did they manage this? But it didn't knock a sweat out of them. They done it with a smile on their face is the best way to describe it, sure.
Very good. And I suppose actually, I was only thinking about it there yesterday, John, as well. Now people might be getting tied up, as you said there earlier, with maybe having to feed a bit of silage and so forth by that stage if the weather doesn't turn some little bit in between. But it actually, because of the proximity of the two events, we'll say with Ballyvedden on the following day, both excellent events and will be well worth looking at from a point of view, maybe a group attending the two events and staying somewhere locally overnight or whatever. So if people are looking for something to do for a group trip or whatever, highly recommended that you'd consider the Grassland Summer Tour on the Tuesday the 21st, and then Ballyvedden the Beef Open Day, which is free actually. I'll throw that one in there, John. And the Wednesday the 22nd near Feathered. So they're very close proximity. So might suit people looking for to kind of start out a trip for the summer and get away from their home farm for a couple of days to clear the head, I suppose, and still pick up some great information and knowledge from both farms.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to Ballyvedden as well. I think the dairy beef thing, all the debates that we have around milking platform, stocking rate, and you have this outside land and stuff like that. I'm really interested to see what role does the dairy beef have. And it's funny how things have changed so much, where people would nearly be scolded for having beef stock around on a dairy farm, but the whole landscape has changed on that, so it should be really interesting. And a lot of the traditionalists who've always kept a few beef maybe would be interesting to see how to increase performance on the dairy calf to beef side, Stuart. So I think there'll be two really good events, and yeah, it would be a really nice trip there. And a group could stay in Dungarvan or Clonmel handy enough, and have a bit of crack around and head on to the 2 events. So I think that's a good idea.
Very good. So look, as I said, I'm conscious that you're under pressure there for time, so I'll let you go. And thanks for coming on to this morning with me, John. And we'll see you in a couple of weeks' time.
Thanks a million, Stuart. Much appreciated.
That's all for this week's episode of the Dairy Edge podcast, and my thanks to John O'Loughlin for joining me on this week's show. Don't forget to rate, review and subscribe to the podcast. You can listen on Apple and Google Podcasts as well as Spotify, and for more information go to the Teagasc website at teagasc.ie. I'm Stuart Childs, and join us next time for your Dairy Edge.